Sorry.
Okay, we'll cut it.
Flood warning.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Do What You Can for the People, the show that nobody asked for. I'm here today with my dear friend Vivian. Vivian is the founder and lead consultant at Ascendant Sustainable Events. We've been friends for over 10 years and we've worked together in so many different capacities. I think I've lost track of all the ways.
Yeah.
We have a lot of fun and we have a lot in common, but the thing that we've been vibing on the hardest for the past few years is sustainability, duh. Vivi's company Ascendance made its grand entrance onto the scene earlier this year and is entirely dedicated to helping events become more sustainable. Thanks so much for being on the show, Vivi.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so good to see what you're creating and to be a part of it. Love it.
What else are you gonna do in quarantine but create content?
Yeah.
Right? So I thought we'd kick things off the way that we usually do on the show with some facts and some info. And today we'll be talking about event sustainability. Everyone knows that events are temporary in nature, right? They happen, you get together, you build it up, it happens, and then everyone kind of goes on their way. But what a lot of people forget is that events are inherently wasteful. Once the attendees have gone home, the vendors have packed up, everything's broken down, the community that the event was in is left to deal with all of the unintended negative consequences that sometimes take weeks, months, or even years to fully manifest. And so that's what Vivi has really dedicated her life and her business to, is helping events see those unintended consequences and mitigate them before they happen. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, totally correct. And it as we'll talk about it comes from all different angles, what those impacts can look like. But yeah, most of the time it's just a exorbitant amount of waste and, things that are completely avoidable if we just thought a little bit more about it and took some time to strategize around it. And so, yeah, that's what I help events do.
Which is great.
Yeah.
So Vivi and I worked together this year on an event sustainability guide, which we will link down below where you can go and get that. And she identified 6 categories for making events more sustainable. And so I thought we'd quickly talk about these and you can give us a high-level takeaway for each. So the first, and maybe we should talk about the first 2 together,
Sure.
are preventing pollution and reducing waste. So What is the difference between those 2 and how do they overlap in certain ways?
Sure. So they certainly overlap because as you reduce your waste, you reduce your pollution, kind of, in a related way, but not necessarily, right? So a lot of the pollution that happens on an event site comes from stuff that people bring in themselves, right? It has nothing to do with what the festival brings in some cases. And the biggest example of that is cigarette butts, right? Like everybody brings their cigarettes, they smoke them, they end up on the ground. That's, one of the number one things that we find after events is cigarette butts, because most cleaning crews are trained to pick up the cups, they pick up the bottles, they pick up, what we call the macro trash, but the micro litters, then, those are the ones that really end up staying in the environment. And so that's why they're 2 different things. It's because the micro usually comes from things that people bring in themselves, little gum wrappers, random little things. Whereas the waste really is stuff that the festival creates. So some initiatives for preventing pollution look totally different than initiatives for reducing waste, right? Like your biggest one will be a Leave No Trace campaign or something similar, right? Leave No Trace is an awesome organization that has developed campaign after campaign for national parks, for events, for all sorts of different partnerships that they have. So you can either have an official Leave No Trace campaign or you can make your own. We did, for example, at an event that I did last year, we called it Leave Only Footprints because it was an event on the beach.
Love that.
So yeah, you can make cute little campaigns like that that have presence before the event. When people arrive at the event, there should be signage. It's just kind of reminding people. And it's a big kind of collaboration with your cleaning crew, right? Because the cleaning crew, if they're trained properly, if they're even like outfitted in t-shirts that have the campaign on them, then it's a really good constant reminder of let's keep the place clean. Because what we've learned time after time is that once it starts getting messy, people stop caring. They know that, somebody's going to have to clean up this mess. So I'm just going to throw my stuff on the ground too. So that's preventing pollution, but then waste reduction, as you know, is like a big, kind of strategy that can be put in place. And this really goes into thinking, backwards, thinking from, fast forward to a dumpster at the end of your event. What is in that dumpster? Is it, like what makes up a majority of that stuff? How can you find another home for that stuff? So many times the stuff that ends up in dumpsters is perfectly usable by a community organization or somebody who's like, we donated things to the parks department last year because they were going to construct something out of the wood that we didn't use. So things like that, partnerships like that, are great waste reduction initiatives. And then there's also, of course, recycling and the types of materials that you use. If you can use compostable materials and make sure that those get processed accordingly, things like that. So it's kind of a bigger scale thing to do waste reduction.
Absolutely. And one thing that I noted when you were talking about preventing pollution, and this is something that I think is very central to your business and your brand and your ethos in life, is it has a lot to do with marketing, and the marketing then feeds into educating the consumer. And I think that's really what a lot of this is getting at, not just the consumer, but also the community, the vendors, the partners that you engage with.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Communication is the key to any of these campaigns being successful, but it's important, like you pointed out, to remember that our communications aren't just what goes out on our social media, right? Our communications are what goes out to our vendors, what goes out to our employees, what goes out to our staff. All of that should be part of the communication plan of a sustainability initiative. So yeah, it starts with that internal communication. It starts with getting the entire organization and all of your partners to buy in on these new values that you're trying to establish. And then only then can you really kind of host the event and come from a place of already setting it up for success.
Mm-hmm. So let's go through a couple more of these categories. The next one is conserving nature.
Yeah. So conserving nature is my favorite. It's definitely one of the things that I like to specialize on is events that happen in outdoor spaces that have kind of sensitive natural habitats around them. Something I specialized in with my work at Ultra and that same venue. I've had multiple events there. So yeah, when we're going to these events, which are happening more and more, and I think after COVID going to happen more and more, where we're going to be wanting to be in outdoor spaces, we're going to be wanting to be in nature. What can we do to first understand the space that we're in and then conserve it as much as possible? So some good examples of this are like doing these kind of surveys with local naturalists or biologists or ecologists that really understand the ecology of that space. So that they can first kind of make you aware of, okay, these are native trees and these are native plants, these are invasive, so those we don't have to worry about that much. They kind of start to draw you a map of where is safe to be and where you have to be careful. And then it also gives you a really good opportunity to educate people. So it's been so nice when I learn, that this like massive tree that's in the middle of, an event has been there for 200 years. And then we can put up a little sign in front of it that says, hey, I'm 200 years old and, please don't hang from my branches. Things like that. So those are great nature conservation initiatives that can always be present. At an event, whether you're in a natural space or you're not, even if you have an event that's taking place in a warehouse, well, do you have a beach nearby that you can maybe, host a beach cleanup at before or after the event? Can you, take on, a mission of educating people on marine debris. And so you do some sort of, donation to a local nonprofit organization. There's tons of stuff that can be done to conserve nature, and always related to like the nature that's present around the venue.
And that also then makes it a little bit bigger than just taking care of the venue, which I think is important when you're coming at sustainability from any angle, is that you have to remember the whole and think about the system, which kind of leads into the next one, which is managing natural resources, which don't belong to an individual venue, but
Right.
to the community at large.
Right. So our natural resources that we want to, always be considerate of is our water, our energy, and our air. Those are the main ones, and certainly energy and air have been the ones that, have really risen to the top with the whole climate change conversation, because, we're really learning and seeing a very real impact of, our energy usage and how much carbon footprint we're creating, and how much that carbon in the air is directly attributed to climate change. So that's the biggest thing that I focus on usually when managing natural resources. I try to first conserve energy everywhere possible, move from really high carbon footprint energy sources like diesel generators, move those to biodiesel if I have to use a generator, or move it to ground power if we have ground power. So many times I've learned that events just kind of don't trust the ground power that's there, even though it's been proven to work and can be tested. They just rather have their generator, and it's like, can we please not do that? Yeah. So things like that. But you can of course do easy things also, like, managing your water usage. All it takes is like a little sign on the mirror by the bathroom sinks that say, hey guys, turn me off when you're done, or try to keep this light. Paper is another good example of a natural resources. It comes from trees. So can we use sustainably sourced papers? Can we make sure that we're recycling papers that are able to be recycled? Things like that.
Yeah. I also would love one day, and this can be an offline chat, to talk about whether or not events are thinking about doing carbon offsets, especially if they like attract a very international crowd. So that's something that I worked on in school. Was we had a footprint committee, and because a lot of our students travel from all across the nation, we calculated our program's carbon footprint and then purchased the required offsets.
Yep. Yeah, we absolutely were thinking that for Ultra 2020. We were actually working out a partnership. It's unfortunate that it didn't come to fruition, but we were working out a partnership with a local carbon offsetting company that was actually going to plant trees here locally.
Oh.
And that was like, such a beautiful initiative. And I hope we can bring it back someday, because, like a lot of these carbon offsetting programs, first of all, if we can talk about it for a minute, like make sure that it's verified, make sure that it's, something that, is being held accountable to some sort of standard. I've heard some nightmares about some of these programs, but it's pretty easy now to figure out which ones are good and not. But in a lot of cases, the projects actually happen somewhere else in the world. This particular one that we're working with, their offset programs were like in the Amazon or in Africa, and that's amazing. Absolutely. We're gonna kind of invest half of our offsets in those projects, but then we wanted it to have a really local impact as well. So they actually were researching how to partner with a local government agency that was planting trees, kind of like with the local parks department. So it was really, really awesome. And yeah, hopefully we can do something like that.
Love that.
Yeah.
So I think the last four that we've talked about, which just as a recap, were preventing pollution, reducing waste, conserving nature, and managing natural resources, all kind of feed into the fifth one, which we've touched on, engaging communities. So why don't you tell us about how that is a core element of making events more sustainable?
Yeah, so I think that once you kind of figure out what it is that you want to do for all four of those, previous subjects, then you can move into the communications, like external communications and internal communications, like we talked about before. And that's where you can engage your community, right? So the biggest community that you can engage is your attendees. Normally, it's the people that are on your property. You have the ability to kind of control a little bit of what they're being exposed to, and yeah, with those communications, you can kind of, you know, train them on what to expect when they're coming to your event, and then, you know, give them a little bit of idea of how they can help, how they can participate. You can do that before, and then when they arrive, you know, again, signage, announcements, like whatever it looks like for the event that makes sense. You know, we're doing app push notifications sometimes as well. Um, so yeah, that's how you really get the community engaged in actually participating in the initiative, right? Because some of these initiatives are really back of house. They're really, you know, like premeditated strategy on how things are going to look, and then once the event is live, it's happening. But for example, with the Leave No Trace campaign or something similar, that's really like a full, everybody has to get on board to do that. So that's where those internal and external communications come into play. And then, you know, a huge part of that is that your community externally, you know, not just your attendees, but your local, you know, host city will see what you're doing. And then hopefully, you know, you can use those engagements to, you know, show your local councils, your local decision makers, your, you know, local organizations, like, hey guys, this is what we're doing. Do you want to join on? Do you want to come have a booth at our event and, you know, help us with this, bring volunteers? Like, you know, that's when, you know, these really awesome partnership opportunities come to play, like the one that we're working on with this carbon offsetting group. So yeah, that's you know, it's really beautiful when you finally see that an event has done a good job of this. And so yeah, that's kind of the best part, in my
I think
opinion.
one of my favorite takeaways from your guide around engaging communities was also around talking to the people who are already doing the sustainability work in your community, which is twofold. It's one, you draw them into the conversation and you make them an ally as opposed to an adversary. And two, work smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
If they're already experts in the field, use that so you can get to your end goal faster.
For sure. And more often than not, they really are dying to, you know, just share with you everything that they know, everything that they've been learning this entire time that they've been, you know, an organization. Like that really was the case, you know, for Ultra. And it was so funny because at first these were the organizations that were most worried about, you know, what Ultra was going to do. And in the end, they ended up being, like you said, our biggest allies. I mean, they really taught us, and you know, not only just like how Miami works from an environmental perspective, put us in touch with the right people so that we could really get good knowledge, but they also, you know, just supported all of our initiatives, and they even did a like unexpected audit of our initiatives and gave us an A grade on, you know, everything that we did. So it was really awesome. I loved working with them.
It was a good time.
Yeah.
The last one, which is a relatively new one for the list, but it should have been thought of all along, if you ask me, is promoting public health.
Mhm.
And I think that has a lot to do with the recent news of the pandemic. But how does promoting public health come into play with an event?
So, you know, like we've been talking about, right? Like all of these communications that go out that, you know, should be going out regardless, you know, whether it's sustainability related or like how to get your tickets, how to, you know, check in. Like there's always a lot of communication that goes out in advance of an event. So why not, you know, use this opportunity also to communicate how people can be safe and healthy? You know, it adds to the sustainability of your event when your event is, you know, considered a safe place that's giving people the opportunity, you know, to stay healthy, and then also encouraging that, and you know, and then like just maintaining it, because, you know, hey, if you have an outbreak at your event, what are the chances that, you know, you're going to be able to come back? I mean, you know, that's an impact on the community that is, you know, far worse than, you know, everything else that we've discussed. I mean, health is numero uno. So yeah, you know, and something else that we've been trying to focus on is how can we both promote public health and be sustainable, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you know, a lot of the advice that I've been seeing come out by organizations is like completely reverting to old styles of you know, of use once and throw away. I mean, I've seen it on multiple guides already. Like, make sure you're using single-use plastic water bottles. It's like, what? No, like, you know, it you can be healthy and sustainable.
Right.
You know, there are ways. Soap and water is the number one thing that the CDC has recommended for how you can clean your place. You
Which has
know,
been
like,
around for like maybe longer than plastic
yeah,
has been around. It's like people completely
exactly.
forgot about that.
Yeah, people forgot that for a long time we didn't even have plastic. So just blows my mind when you know, I'm seeing some of this advice. And yeah, so that's what we're trying to do, is really, you know, help events to you know, be prepared for you know, safety and in public health, but also to keep sustainability in mind when they're doing it. And that looks as easy as, you know, having sanitizing stations and hand washing stations that are properly stocked. I mean, how many times have you gone to an event and you go to wash your hands, there's no water? You know, like, okay, so we get to be better at that, and you can also wash other things in, you know, these water stations, things like that. So we'll figure it out.
We will. I have
Yeah.
faith in humanity to figure out the
Same.
basics. So we've talked a lot in theory, and you've given us some great examples, but I thought we could go through a few more examples from around the world, because sustainability is happening everywhere. And quite frankly, I think a lot of other countries are doing it a lot better than we are. So the first one that I wanted to bring up is the Glasgow 2014 Commonwealth Games. It was the first Commonwealth Games to secure the ISO 2001.
20. We always struggle with that in the sustainability world.
Sustainability.
2121.
Yeah, that one, which was more than 2.1 million people that attended events over a period of time held throughout Scotland to celebrate the Glasgow 2014 Commonwealth Games. And on top of doing the things that you would normally expect a modern event to do, things like composting all their food and having, you know, better forms of cutlery and stuff like that, they also reused 260,000 items of furniture and equipment from the London 2012 Olympics. They had recycling ambassadors, which I know you will give us better examples of later. Their game venues were constructed using recycled food waste, which I found really interesting. And
Wow.
over the year, Scotland collected compost from its residents and then used that compost to grow the astroturf that was used in the athletes' village. That was just
awesome.
a really cool example of an entire city coming together to make this an event that they were proud of, not just because they were hosting it, but because of the way that they were hosting it with those sustainability goals in mind.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, definitely Europe has always just amazed me at how far ahead of the game they are as compared to us. You know, that's where I've learned a lot of, you know, kind of my principles have come, and examples have come from there. I don't know if you saw too, like in London last year for Glastonbury, they had, you know, their first single-use plastic-free event. As far as like the distributions that were coming from the festival, they had no single-use plastic, and they did like this series of beach cleanups all over the country, and they collected I can't remember how many pounds of plastic waste from the, you know, from the water, and they actually melted it together and built a stage out of it.
That's so cool.
So yeah, it's like they are, you know, I look up to them, and you know, hope for my events to do amazing things like that someday. There's also Digital Festival in Amsterdam. They're going to be like the world's first circular festival, entirely circular. They will have no waste and do something with the rest of it. It's just
That's
incredible.
awesome.
Yeah.
Definitely got to make it out there for that festival one of these
Yeah.
days. But I was doing some research for this episode, and I just found like lists on lists on lists of all the European festivals, and a lot of festivals in Southeast Asia as well that are really doing awesome things with sustainability. So, but let's bring it back home and let's talk about an event that is near and dear to both of us, Burning Man, which is where a lot of this inspiration sparked for both of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Like attending Burning Man my first time back in 2011, you know, that is where all of this really, you know, kind of started for me. You know, seeing a community come together to take care of a space that big and that expansive, and you know, not seeing like having people notice when there was one tiny piece of trash that was, floating along and everybody running after it. I mean, that just completely blew my mind. It completely changed my perspective on, how we should behave at an event. Having to think before going about, all of the packaging that we use. And like, that was the first time that I had ever had to like take apart my packaging, of all of the things that I bought and throw it away. And when I ended up with this massive bag of trash, I was like, wow, like we don't feel it as much when we're, just doing one pack of batteries, one bag of toilet paper, whatever it is. But wow, like when you see it like that, it's extraordinary. And so it really just kind of made me realize how impactful I was being as an attendee, thinking that, I'm super eco-conscious. And, no, I myself had a lot of ways that I had to figure out what to do with. So,
and it's not like a knock against who you are. It's the world that we live in, for a large part, that everything comes in so much packaging. But I think for me, one of the eye-opening moments at Burning Man was the last day when we had to do our moop sweeps with a giant rake of our like large campsite, and we had to pick up every boa feather, every little piece of plastic, every piece of glitter had to be picked up and accounted for. And for me, that was like, oh, it's not just leave no trace to the naked eye, it's truly leave no trace. Like, pick up your shit, put it in a bag and take it with you, because there is no such thing as away. This is not your away. So I thought that was
for sure. I mean, that's when you really start to learn what it means, right? And you really start to realize, like, at first I was kind of like, well, like one piece of glitter, like what's that gonna do? No, there are insects, and there's like, even in that desert, you see all sorts of little crawly things that might, come across that. And it changed my perspective too on, like, I used to think, oh, well, is it really going to hurt them? Well, yes, it can hurt them. Micro litter is absolutely the worst thing that can, a small animal can come into contact with. But even then, it's like, why are we okay with just like leaving all of this stuff there? Like, it's not there naturally, so it shouldn't be there when we leave. So yeah, it's a lot, and it's amazing.
I think everyone should go to Burning Man at least once in their life.
Everyone. Yeah.
Agree. Not to mention, it's just a great time. Like, we make it sound like a lot of work, but go to Burning Man. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. It's totally worth it.
And then let's bring it even a little bit more close to home. So let's talk about Ultra Music Festival in Miami, which is your baby. I'll call it your baby.
Yeah, it was my baby. So yeah, I mean, I was brought on to Ultra because I had already done a couple of events at this very eco-sensitive venue, which is Virginia Key Beach Park. For those of you who don't know, it's my favorite place in Miami. It is absolutely an island paradise. Like, you feel like you're in a postcard. It is just the most beautiful space. If I could live there in a tree, I would. So I had done a couple of events at that park, and suddenly, Ultra, which usually happens at Bayfront Park, which is downtown. It's an urban park that has a lot of like facilities, and it's more concrete, and has some trees and stuff, but it is more of an urban park. The festival that year got moved to Virginia Key. And so, I mean, it was, the whole community was up in arms, including myself, to be honest. Like, I was really not sure, if this was a good idea. It's, my events that had taken place at Virginia Key were 5,000 person events, where, this event is 50,000 people per day for 3 days. So yeah, it was worrisome. And suddenly one thing led to the other, and my name got, sent to Ultra's management, and they got in touch with me because they really wanted somebody. They were really serious, which I wasn't aware of at the time, but they were really, really serious about taking care of the park. And they really wanted somebody who was familiar with the park and who had done things like this before. And I was really the only person who had. So Yeah, it was an amazing ride. It was my dream job. I worked with them for 2 years. We're on our way to doing the second year when the event got postponed, unfortunately. But yeah, in our first year alone, we reduced our plastic items by 526,000 single-use plastic items. We had 100% of our recycling loads were accepted at the facility, which is unheard of for an event of this size. We diverted, what was it, 59,000 pounds of waste. I think actually it went over. I think it was like 60,000, something like that, pounds of waste. We had like almost 100% compliance of, like, we did all of these bans. I mean, you were there for this, you know, you did so much work with me on making sure that, you know, all of the internal communications that we had sent out were followed and that our vendors were doing the right thing. And they really did. They were so proud of complying to all of our, you know, asks of, like, hey, don't use single-use plastic. Don't, you know, make sure your stuff is backyard compostable. And yeah, you saw we had, you know, almost 100% compliance. It was amazing. So yeah, I mean, it was definitely my proudest accomplishment. We launched a campaign that year called the Mission Home campaign. That was kind of our sustainability program, and it reached 2.7 million people before the gates even opened. So
Incredible.
yeah, it was just, it was really, really amazing. And that's just a testament to what can happen when an organization really gets behind this. And all it took was bringing on one person that really cared about it. Because, you know, everybody thinks that I had like this massive team, you know, like I had a great little team. By the time we got to the event, I really needed my little team. Thank
Small
God.
but mighty.
Yeah.
I
But
think
yeah.
one of my favorite memories from that ultra was about the dance and cleans, how we were doing a little TV segment for it. And we went into one of the stage areas, and the whole idea behind the dance and clean crew was it was these volunteers wearing capes, holding trash bags, wearing gloves, and they would dance through the crowd and they would pick up the trash and like encourage other people to pick up the trash. And this segment was being filmed on the last day, and so I guess we had done our job too well
Yeah.
because there was no trash on
Yeah.
the dance floor.
Yep, we had to plant trash on
I
the
had to
dance
like
floor.
dump some out, and it just went against everything in my soul to be littering like that. But you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah. Yeah, that was so funny. I remember I was like, okay, I was like trying to like make sure I saw every cigarette butt that we like put back on the ground so that we could bring them all back in. But yeah,
Yeah,
we did too good of a job. There was no
people
trash.
were really into that too. The idea of like these caped heroes coming in and like educating people, like, hey, pick up your trash. It's
Yep.
fun, and it was so effective, so genius.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was so much fun. And yeah, we were, you know, in 2020, we were looking forward to expanding that program. I had ordered, oh my gosh, I like still have a bunch of capes that we ordered, and like, you know, we're gonna do it bigger and better too. And that's what's really cool is, you know, we accomplished all of that in Ultra's first year. And so seeing what it was gonna be in 2020 and what it'll hopefully be in some future, it's like incredible to see how you can, you know, test these initiatives, learn stuff really quickly about how you can do better, and then come back and do it better the next year. And it even comes a bit easier because you've figured out most of the logistics and you just have to make tweaks. You know, it's kind of like the eco village, right? Like the eco village at Ultra was historically this like health and wellness space, and you know, us coming on and doing this, you know, whole sustainability program, we're like, all right, we get to make it really the eco village. And we had all of these environmental organizations that came, we tested some cool stuff. And so, you know, in 2020, some of those ideas were going to get expanded to more of the festival. And that's what we're trying to do, as well as like bring some new ideas in, and then hopefully in 2021, expand those into the festival. So you can really use it as kind of a testing grounds for, you know, what can, you know, become a bigger initiative in the future. And, you know, usually you're able to make something happen. So it's really cool.
Awesome. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the future? Talk about Ascendance and how you're going to take all of these wonderful experiences, not just from Ultra, but your life experiences plus your passion, and change the event space, because I know you will.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's the dream, you know, and especially it's been so funny to see all of this happen, you know, at first, like seeing COVID completely wipe out the events industry was shocking and scary, and you know, it did not feel good, and especially did not feel good after working so hard on Ultra, and not having it come to fruition. But you know what it created is this like massive pause and this industry wide you know forced time to rethink and re-strategize and you know and change things. I mean, the number one excuse that I hear when I present sustainability initiatives to an event is we don't have time. And now you have all the time in the world, guys. All right, so let's figure this out. So that's what the future looks like for us. We built this guide, which thank you so much for everything that you put into it. I mean, it literally would not be without you. So thank you.
I had the best time.
Yeah, it was so great working on it with you. And I'm so happy it's out. I'm so happy about the media attention that it's received beyond all of our expectations, I think. You know, so that's what's in the future for us. We're just going to continue putting out education and helping people with everything we can. As I've always said, it's about the real green for us, not the other kind of green, not the money. You know, like we really just want to put these resources out there so that events can do them, whether they can hire us on or not. And if you need help, great, we're here. You know, certainly it's the bigger events that usually need like a really, really, you know, specific plan for how this is all going to take place. But even the smaller events, you know, and that's why we try to do packages that are reasonable for small events as well. We just did an event industry relief package that starts at $260, I think. So it's like, you know, we just want to be able to at least give you the tools that you need. And that way, you know, while you have some time on your hands, you know, think about how you can do this, even if it's just taking on a couple of small things. You know, how are we going to make some progress coming out of this? And as you've seen, you know, there's been so much, you know, progress in the environment, right? We've seen like wildlife taking back over these places that we never expected and super quickly, you know. And so it's like, how can we continue to support that? How can we, you know, step lightly back on the planet instead of, you know, just kind of erasing all the progress that the planet made? And you know, I'm hoping that this does a little bit of that.
I know it will.
Yeah.
I'll be sure to include links down in the description box so people can find you on social media, can find your website, can download the amazing guide that we wrote, get in touch with you, hire you, do all of those wonderful things. And before we say goodbye, do you have any other closing words, Vivi?
You know, I guess I have closing words for everybody who's not an event organizer. Like, this is the time to reach out to those people and be like, hey, this is important to me. And you know what? During my time in lockdown, I realized that I made some changes, and I think you guys can too. And so that's really one of the ideas behind the guide is, you know, and making it open source. It's completely free. It's, you know, you can download it on our website. So, you know, send them the guide, or, you know, just mention in a comment on social media that this is, you know, something that you're looking forward to when they come back. You know, I think that, you know, we talk so much about what event organizers can do, but really it's the attendees that have the power to voice what is important to them and what they're going to be looking for. And event organizers listen to their attendees, right? Like, those are your ticket holders. Those are the people that keep your event alive. So it is just as important for us as attendees to, you know, reach out to the events that we love and tell them that this is something that we expect and that we want to see them working on. And by all means, shoot them our contact information.
Yeah, definitely. Vivi will hold them accountable. I know that.
Yeah.
All right, Viv, thanks so much for joining us. And to everyone else, I'll see you next time.
See ya.